But I'd like to sort of draw back, if you like, from that focus on this particular aspect of meditation practice, the attitude we bring to it, and kind of take in a bigger picture, and an invitation to ask ourselves, well, actually, when we are looking at our experience, what does this experience actually consist of? So whether we are experiencing patience or impatience, or whether we are grasping or letting go, or whether there's a commitment or no interest. So, whatever degrees of the attitudinal foundations of mindfulness that we're experiencing, what actually is all of this? And it's an inquiry that's I connected with explicitly, I guess around about 20 years ago, when I was experiencing kind of a major crisis in my life. And it was the crisis that eventually brought me to mindfulness training. But even before then, even though what I really, really wanted above almost anything else was to feel better than I did, there was a kind of already a sort of a underlying something else there, which is that I realized that I really wanted to understand as best as I could what this being human is, and to be able to kind of make some kind of sense of existence. Actually, as I discovered much later on, the quest to experience greater well-being or deeper well-being and the quest to understand experience actually go together. They weren't separate quests, because in order to relate skillfully with the world and therefore to experience perhaps a greater degree of wellness, it turns out that it's vital actually to align ourselves with the way that the world and our own experience within it is, because the much of our distress seems to come from a misalignment, a misperception, if you like, a mistake on our experience, mistaking of our experience. So for me, this was something of a kind of existential crisis that rocked me deeply, because I was very kind of stuck in my ideas about who I thought I was before this, and this was a kind of almost like a complete dissolution of that. But of course, in the dissolution, there wasn't really anything to take its place at that time, which was very, very distressing. However, it was a bit like, they sometimes use this phrase in the Zen tradition, a bit like emptying the cup. Kind of, you have to empty the cup before you can fill it up again. The sort of the breakdown that I experienced was actually a kind of emptying of the cup of contents that wasn't actually very helpful, and within that came the opportunity to begin to perhaps fill it with more nurturing content. Of course, I approached this at the time in the only way that I knew how at that point, which was to try and understand intellectually something about life. And so I actually had, if you'd have seen me at that point, I was living in a flat in London, and my bedroom was actually filled with books, just kind of book after book after book after book, kind of piled up together, most of which I actually read because I had a lot of time at that point. So I just kind of sort of tried to fill myself with knowledge, and there was a certain degree of helpfulness in that, but it was very limited because, as you know, even as long ago as Sigmund Freud said that giving somebody insight is a bit like giving a starving person a menu. It's not actually very helpful. And indeed, it can actually make things worse because you can imagine all of the tasty dishes that you don't have access to. So it was a bit like that, actually. I kind of could see perhaps, some of what I was looking for, but I couldn't actually taste it, couldn't access it, which is very frustrating. Nevertheless, many of those books, in some way, recommended meditation. And so, I kept getting this message that, if you want to actually make a difference, then you need to have a method that is not just filling your mind with knowledge and more concepts. So meditation, I think I described it at the beginning of the session as being a bit like a mirror. I suppose what I mean by that is it's a way to look at experience, to gain another perspective that we wouldn't usually get. In the Buddhist tradition, there's a phrase, it's a bit like turning your eyeballs inwards, which is a bit of a kind of, maybe you don't want to think about that too much, but, a sense of actually really looking in when the usual perspective is to look out. So we're kind of completely, managing a complete shift, 180-degree shift in where we look and what we look at, and also how we look. So, this is in no way is a, was a kind of, in no way a philosophical shift or a theological shift or, some sense of why are we here, So I don't have any answers to that kind of question. But more a kind of phenomenological approach of what's here and what can I learn from it? And so I've found over the time that I've been practicing that there are certain key themes that come up again and again, and that have actually, I discover, come up again and again through in meditation practice over the centuries, millennia. That are kind of important insights to deepen, and these are that first of all, recognizing really deeply that things are continually changing, including us, which is kind of obvious. Nobody, if you look at yourself, you don't look the same as you did 30 years ago. Can guarantee that pretty much, and you won't look the same again in X number of years ahead either. You just have to look at my hair over the last 4 months to prove that. Or what's left of it is, of course, I had a lot more 20 years ago. Now it just grows in certain kind of down the side until I get a haircut, which is next Wednesday, by the way. So next Thursday you might see something different. I digress. But it's a reality. It can't actually be denied. And I wasn't interested in the kind of sort of ideas about the world that required me to believe something that couldn't be proven. So this is this could be investigated through practice. Are things continually changing, including us? Another kind of insight that came very quickly for me in meditation was just how much I was clinging to certain aspects of myself and aspects of my experience, and in particular, this clinging and its sort of twin brother aversion. Kind of like either clinging as in getting caught in something, or aversion as in wanting to pull away from something, and that showed up constantly in a very stark way in the early months and years of my practice, and just seeing how much we cling to, how much we have ideas about ourselves, we have ideas about others, and that leads to a kind of a holding on to cherished concepts, which actually then are felt as physical experiences. So, the kind of desire for security in us is so strong. And yet, the one thing we really don't have is that kind of security. Again, the last few months has proven this very clearly. You get a tiny, tiny, tiny virus, and it throws the whole world into pandemonium. And so, it doesn't take much to show us that things are not as stable and secure as we want them to be. However, and this creates suffering and stress. However, what meditation also began to teach me is that there's a kind of a way to work with this. There's a way through this, which is actually to practice over and over again, aligning ourselves with the way things are. So to actually accept the world as it is. What in 12-step programs they call living life on life's terms, which is a useful phrase, I think. You actually accept that, okay, this is how the game works, and I can either resist it and be really unhappy, or I can go with it and develop some sense of flowing with the way things are. So beginning to understand these kind of core realities of life then gives us the opportunity to begin to work with them, to align ourselves to them. So there's kind of three stages which kind of I've sort of identified just reflecting on this afternoon. Is that it requires some investigation, first of all. This is the looking. It requires a lot more than some, actually. It requires considerable letting go of, perhaps our attachment to the way we want to be or think we should be, or that others should be or shouldn't be, or the world should be or shouldn't be. Letting go of our images, our cherished images of control and how life should be. And it also requires some action. So the meditation practice is one example of taking action again and again and again to realign ourselves with these discoveries. So kind of three interconnected stages: investigation, letting go, and kind of realignment. And all three of them are present in meditation practice. So, over those 20 years or so that I've been practicing, I have found that, it's true that, I'm experiencing a great deal more well-being than I was. But that's gone hand in hand with a kind of a sense of greater acceptance, greater understanding, I believe, at least insofar as I know. It's like we can only work with what we've got. So we could be very much like if you imagine an ant in a field, and the ant, it's got this one field, and that's its world. And it can only use its senses and the equipment that it has to make sense of that world. So if we imagine ourselves as the ant in this universe, so I think it's important to be humble about what we don't know, and yet if we work with what we can know experientially, moment by moment, my experience at least is that we can gradually cultivate a greater degree of contentment with how things are, which doesn't require anything to be perfect. So in these sessions I've tried to sort of look at aspects of mindfulness, and I'll continue to do that, but I just felt today for some reason that it might be valuable to have a sort of a big picture view of what this practice can help us with. And by the way, not to worry if you're not at all interested in any of that, because it'll still help with stress reduction you know, helping us manage our thoughts. And, you know, they're not different. They're actually not different, you know, different streams. They're all part of the same working with what we are and who we are, and finding skillful ways to do that. So let's drop then into a practice. And the invitation during this practice from me, if you want to, completely up to you, is just to be really interested in the quality of investigation. Kind of like, what are you noticing right now? An invitation to bring an attitude of letting go. Of course, this is one of the attitudinal foundations of mindfulness. So of being interested in what you cling to or what you want to avoid. And then the action is simply repeating again and again. When the mind wanders, come back. When the mind wanders, come back. When you find yourself clinging, allow that to be noticed and unhooked from. When you find yourself conceptualizing, noticing that, coming back. And this, as we know from, you know, the scientific work on the neuroplasticity of mindfulness, that this does change the brain and therefore changes our experience over time.